"Don't weep, lady. Papa knows how to mend broken hearts," whispered the child, leading her toward a dwelling where a wordless cowboy stood waiting. Wind River Pass, Wyoming Territory. February 1887. The wind screamed like spirits lamenting the departed. Snow descended thick across the mountain corridor, burying the evergreen limbs and obscuring the peaks where dying sunlight struggled and surrendered. Isabella Morgan drew her wrap closer against her frame, the fabric rigid with frost. Her hands, once tender and smooth, bore cracks and wounds from days clutching leather straps that had long since deteriorated. Her cart remained motionless, angled awkwardly where the front wheel support had broken 2 miles behind. The mule had vanished, frightened or taken, she no longer knew, and numbness had replaced caring. She perched on a sharp stone half concealed by snow, grasping a silver pendant in her palm. Within lay the image of a youth with tousled locks and a grin broad enough to herald springtime. The chain had scored her fingers from her desperate grip, though agony had ceased to register. "Sam," she breathed, lips scarcely stirring. "I promised to shield you." She shut her eyes, allowing the snow to pierce her face and the wind to slash her throat. Let it claim her. Let this untamed territory, this forsaken frontier where mothers entombed sons in ice, take her as well. Then came the sound of steps unshod, gentle, impossibly delicate, crunching through the stillness. Isabella's eyes opened. A small girl appeared before her, perhaps 7 years old, draped in an oversized coat with hair tangled by wind-whipped knots. Her cheeks glowed from cold, yet her gaze burned fierce, unwavering, dark as caramelized sugar. "Lady," the child spoke softly, voice quavering but resolute. "Don't weep." Joanna blinked. The girl stepped closer. "Papa knows how to mend broken hearts." Joanna stared, too shattered to speak, too frozen to stand. The girl tilted her head, observing her the way forest creatures do when they sense your pain but haven't yet learned whether you might strike. "Are you real?" Joanna rasped finally. The girl nodded slightly. "Where's your kin?" The child pointed toward the timber. "This direction. Our home isn't distant." "He waits." Joanna gazed down at the pendant again, then at the empty path where her mule should have stood, where her wagon leaned abandoned like a dying creature. Snow clung to her skirt's edge and to tears she lacked strength to brush away. She shouldn't follow, yet the girl's eyes contained something she'd glimpsed in her own reflection in the eastern river the day they retrieved her son's body from the ice. Pain too ancient for 7 years, loneliness too vast for such tiny boots. Joanna rose slowly, joints stiff, heart heavier than snow on pelts. "You dwell close by?" The girl nodded. "And your papa?" "He won't object." A brief pause. "He doesn't speak, but he understands healing." Joanna might have posed more questions, demanded evidence, turned to retrace her trail, but something within had ceased struggling long before the snow arrived. Whatever she'd sought had perished on that frozen lake back east. What remained was a woman without destination. And now a child offering direction. "Very well then," she whispered. "Show me the way." The girl didn't smile, merely turned and began walking barefoot into the woods, the coat trailing behind. Joanna followed, uncertain of their destination, uncertain who awaited, knowing only that she couldn't endure another moment alone in the snow. Joanna trailed the child through snow-heavy firs, branches bending under weight like mourning widows. The path was faint, winding into forest shadows where light already dimmed. Then she spotted it, a thread of smoke ascending from a chimney, and beyond, a cabin nestled low in a hollow. 3 horses stood still in a fenced enclosure nearby. From afar, it appeared forgotten. Up close, it breathed quiet life. The girl approached the door and pushed it open without announcing herself. Inside, the air carried scents of smoke, leather, and something earthy. A fire burned low in the hearth. Joanna hesitated at the threshold until a figure emerged from the shadows. A man stepped forward, tall, broad, wearing a threadbare flannel shirt with sleeves rolled to thick forearms. His beard showed touches of gray. His steady, unreadable eyes met hers. He didn't nod, didn't speak, just observed. The girl slipped past him and vanished behind a curtain. The man turned wordlessly, drew a chair near the fire, placed a tin cup on a table, and walked away. Joanna, trembling with cold and uncertainty, stepped inside. The warmth struck her like a wave. She closed the door and sank into the chair, reaching for the cup, just water, but it felt like healing. The man moved about the room, positioning a kettle over the fire, stirring a pot already simmering. He worked in silence, the steady rhythm of someone long accustomed to solitude. Then he looked back at her, his gaze flickering to her soaked boots, then to the hearth. She hesitated, then removed them. He approached, placed a folded blanket in her lap, and turned away. Still no words, yet Joanna felt less alone than she had in months. Later, he handed her a bowl of stew. No invitation, no gesture, just the act. He sat across the room with his own, eating silently. The stew was simple: barley, onion, perhaps elk, but it warmed her chest, her throat, the hollow places inside. She finished slowly, then whispered, "Thank you." He met her gaze, held it, then stood and refilled her bowl. That simple kindness broke her. No one had fed her. No one had cared. Not since Pennsylvania. This man, this stranger, had offered more comfort in silence than anyone else had dared with words. Her throat constricted. She pressed a hand over her mouth. The tears came swiftly. He didn't stare, didn't question. He simply turned back to the fire, back to the kettle, as though granting her space to crumble was its own form of mercy. Joanna wept quietly, completely, and for the first time since ice claimed her son, she felt no need to apologize for it. The storm never truly ended. It merely settled into rhythm, snow falling in thick curtains, then softening to gentle flurries that draped the trees like silk. The path back to the ridge vanished beneath feet of white, and any thought of departure dissolved with the last trail markers. Joanna was snowbound, whether she welcomed it or not. The days that followed found their quiet order. At dawn, the little girl, Lily, she'd finally revealed, would slip from her room, rubbing sleep from her eyes, while Jasper would already be awake, boots laced, axe on shoulder, heading to split wood or break ice from the trough. Joanna began rising earlier too. There was comfort in the routine, even if borrowed. She hauled water, scrubbed cookware with snow and ash, learned to stack kindling as Elias did, not too tight so the fire could breathe. She burned her fingers the first time attempting to relight the stove, but by the third day her fire caught faster than his. Elias never spoke. He gestured, pointed, raised an eyebrow, occasionally nodded, but never a word. Still, she began understanding him. How he preferred his tools returned to their hooks, how he paused a second before deciding to share a meal. Once, while brushing snow off the horses' backs, Joanna turned and caught him watching her from the barn door. His eyes weren't filled with suspicion or curiosity. They held something else, something akin to recognition. She couldn't explain it, but it made her chest warm in a way that felt almost dangerous. Then one night, she woke to a sound she hadn't expected. Words, not hers, not Leia's. "Elias. Anna. No. Stop. Anna, don't." The voice was broken. He was dreaming. She rose quietly and crossed the room. He thrashed once, breath caught. Joanna knelt beside him, hesitant. "It's all right," she whispered. "It's just a dream." He didn't wake. She reached forward slowly and laid a folded cloth across his forehead. The moment it touched his skin, his hand reached up and closed around her wrist. Her breath caught. His hand, rough and calloused, held hers not tight, but firm, like a man gripping driftwood after the wreck. His thumb brushed over her wrist once, slowly, then stopped. Joanna didn't move. She didn't pull away. For the first time, she didn't ache to go back. For the first time, she thought maybe here, where no one spoke, something real was speaking to her. But spring brought visitors. A man named Marshall Wade Fletcher rode into view, wearing a long wool coat with a silver badge tucked inside the front lapel. His face was weathered, his jaw square, his gaze sharp and hunting. "Is he here?" he asked. Behind her, Elias appeared in the doorway, coat still dusty from work in the barn. Sheriff Cole Brennan stared at him. "It's been 12 years, Turner." Elias said nothing. "You killed a man. A soldier. Shot him point blank behind the station house. Claimed you were protecting someone." Elias's jaw twitched barely. Joanna stepped forward. He did it to save someone. Grady's eyes held something almost like pity. The law doesn't work on feelings. And Elias Boone doesn't get to disappear with a child and pretend the past ain't clawing at the door. The deal was simple. Joanna would take Leia and leave, and Grady would say he'd never found Elias. If she refused, marshals would come by week's end. That night, Joanna found a hidden journal beneath the porch floorboards. Grace Turner's journal. The entries revealed the truth. Elias had killed a soldier who'd raised his rifle at Leia, mistaking her for an Indian child. Anna had tried to stop a second shot and was accidentally killed when the gun went off. Elias hadn't spoken since. The next morning, Joanna packed slowly. Leia drew them a picture, 3 figures holding hands beneath a swirling sky, standing before their little cabin. "You can take it," Leia said. "So you don't forget." Joanna mounted her horse with Leia behind her. She looked back one last time. Elias stood in the doorway, gave a single nod, then crossed to the shelf beside the hearth. He lit the old prairie grass wreath, let it burn gently, then placed the remnants beside his wife's sketch and Leia's new drawing. In his storm-worn eyes, there was something new now. Not sorrow, not regret, waiting. 3 years later ***. The cabin hadn't changed. Elias stood beside the largest mare, brushing her coat with practiced care. His beard was fuller now, touched more with grey, but his silence was still absolute, though no longer heavy. Then he heard hoofbeats. A figure emerged on horseback. Lean, weather-beaten, wearing worn leather. Her hair was shorter, her back straighter than he remembered, less fragile, more fire. "Joanna." She dismounted and pulled a folded paper from her coat, offering it with both hands. It was short, written in her hand. "You do not need to say anything. I have heard your heart more clearly than most men who scream to be understood. If there is still space by your fire, I would like to build it with you for as many winters as we are given. ***. Elias studied her, then slowly reached out, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. "Steady. Present." "Yes." Together they walked toward the cabin. Inside, the hearth crackled with fresh cedar. On the shelf above the mantel, beside Anna's sketch and the wreath ash now kept in a glass jar, sat the crayon drawing of 3 figures beneath a smoky sky, unchanged, untouched. Elias moved toward the stove, adding a second mug beside his. He didn't ask if she was staying. She didn't say she was. But the fire burned higher now, and for the first time there were footsteps inside that house that wouldn't leave again. And so, in a land where silence was often louder than any sermon, where justice wore more than one face, and love came wrapped in stillness and snow, a man who hadn't spoken in 12 years found someone who heard him anyway. And a woman who thought her heart had frozen found it beating again beside a quiet fire. Some stories don't need grand endings, just footsteps that stay and a fire that never dies. If this story stirred something in you, if you believe that love, even in the most lawless of lands, can still bloom between the cracks, then saddle up and ride with us. Subscribe to Wild West Love Stories, where every tale is a heartbeat from the past and every echo is a love that refused to die. Hit that bell, one story might just stay with you forever.